Good morning, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. We're here in the Gan Chapel, taping on Wednesday morning, November the 13th, for Shabbat, November the 16th. Colleagues, we're going to look at two stories today that are really tough stories. They're very hard stories. They're stories where the three human protagonists in the stories do not come out well. Not really, none of them do. And we're in the middle of them. The last one was last week in Lech Lecha, with Sarah and Hagar and Abraham and an angel of the Lord before Ishmael is born. It tells the story of how Ishmael came to be. And then, of course, this week in Vayera, once Ishmael is born and then once Isaac is born, again, the second story of Sarah and Hagar and Abraham and Ishmael and an angel of the Lord. Very tough stories. And you know, there's this expression, Shivim Panim Torah, that Torah has 70 faces, and they're all valid. And you can look at this story in so many different ways. You can look at it as a feminist lens, that this is about the patriarchy, and that both Sarah and Hagar are just caught up in a world where they don't have enough power, and where it's about what happens, the dysfunction that happens in a patriarchy. That's a true lens. It's a valid lens. There's also a socioeconomic lens. There's the person who is rich and has servants, and then there's the servant who works for the person who's rich, and that is a valid critique. There's a racial critique. Hagar is Hagar, the stranger. She's of color. She's Egyptian, and Sarah is presumably white. And so there's an oppressed person of color lens, which is also a legitimate lens. And if anyone wants to bring that up, great. But as I read these two stories in November of 24, I didn't read it through any of those particular lenses, but through a human lens, which is you have three people who are all in pain. Sarah is in a lot of pain. Hagar is in a lot of pain. Abraham is in a lot of pain. Not to mention Ishmael is in a lot of pain. And what does pain do to us? What does pain do to us? And what does this story teach us about a healthy outlet for our pain and a very much not healthy outlet for our pain in a season when there's no shortage of pain that we are all working our way through? So let's thank God for the gift of learning Torah together.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah, v'ha'arev na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu u'b'fi amcha beit Yisrael, v'nihya anachnu v'tzetzaenu v'tzetzai amcha beit Yisrael, kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei Toratecha lishma, Baruch atah Adonai hamelamed Torah li'amo Yisrael, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai notein ha'Torah.
So, Elisa, I was wondering if you could just start us off. Well, you'll start reading from that first story from last week's portion, Genesis 16.
Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. She had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar.
Right, so just want to pause there. Right there, all of a sudden you get at least two of your lenses. You get the fact that there's an economic difference. She's a servant. She's a shifcha. She's a maid. So you have a power imbalance there. One is richer, one is poor. And then you also have she's a mitzrit. She's an Egyptian, and Hagar means the stranger. So you have some kind of a racial difference as well. Socioeconomic difference, racial difference.
Can I make clarification there?
Yeah.
Or at least this is what I think.
Yeah.
I don't agree with you about the color stuff. Ashkenazic Jews, as we refer as whites, were pretty much at the beginning of the diaspora after the destruction of the temple. So most likely in those days, Jews and Egyptians looked exactly the same.
Fair enough, but she's, put it this way, she's an Egyptian. Her very name is Hagar. She is the person who is not as fortified, who is not as protected. She is the stranger.
I agree with all of that.
She's a stranger. I can't help but think of a racial component, but even if there's not, she's clearly not the protected status. And so in the first sentence, you already have a foreshadowing of a lot of factors.
There's one other piece. I was looking in the Midrash, and the rabbis have a couple of interesting stories about her. One being that she was actually Pharaoh's daughter. and that when he recognized God's presence in Sarai and Abram's life, he was like, it would be better for you to be a lowly maidservant there than continue to be Pharaoh's daughter here. And so she actually moves from a position of very high society to a position of very low society, which is a contributing factor potentially, or that she came along with Sarah the whole time, or that she was actually Pharaoh's concubine. So there's all these different origin stories for her that put her at different socioeconomic levels, and I think complicate her story in very interesting ways.
Right, but I just want to say that if you look at the pshat in the first sentence that introduces her, and thank you to Shai Hild for teaching us you can't read Torah too slowly. If you just dilate on this first verse, what do we know about her? She's a shifcha, she's a maidservant. What do we know about her? She's a mitzrit, she's an Egyptian in an Israelite or Canaanite society. What do we know about her? Her name is Hagar, the stranger. So you just get just from the shot of the first verse, you see that this is a person who is the other in an Israelite
Yes,
society.
but it doesn't say anything about color. And my concern about color is all what we've been going through in the last year, the white supremacists and the white Jews, where there are 50%, 60% of Israelis who come from Middle Eastern background.
Fair.
I think there's also, as long as we're reading slowly,
Yes.
the Sarai sentence is also very important because Sarai is Avram's wife who is not fulfilling her wifely duty and who is not succeeding in life. Like her whole sentence is just a sentence of she is his wife, she has no children, she is not functioning in the way that society would expect her to function.
Right. Yes.
Anyway, so the idea will be after a line and a half to stop and discuss, right?
Okay. Please go, Lisa.
And Sarai said to Abram, "Look, the Lord has kept me from bearing. Consort with my maid. Perhaps I shall have a son through her." And Abram heeded Sarai's request. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took her maid, Hagar the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt in the land of Canaan 10 years, and gave her to her husband Abram as a concubine. He cohabited with Hagar, and she conceived.
Let's just pause here. I'm so interested in your reactions to this very hard story. You know, it's typical of the Torah that it doesn't give you any sense of the inner life of the characters. But as this is happening, could you just reflect on the inner life? If we do a Peter Pitzela, you know, what was this biblical character thinking? What is Sarai thinking at this time? What is Hagar thinking? What is Abraham thinking at this time? What comes up for you when you read these really hard, horrible verses?
Well, I'll say I had a conversation with my boys last night at the dinner table, and they were reflecting on their Torah class where they're learning this story, and their basic sense of it was yuck. So, I mean, really, it doesn't translate well into the modern understanding of the world. If you pick up on Eliza's having brought that beautiful midrash about Hagar maybe having a status and then not having that status, we see later she's going to fight for the status. As soon as she gets pregnant, she asserts that she's the dominant one. Then it's an interesting thing that this whole idea comes from Hagar. Comes from Sarah.
Right.
Because Sarah kind of sets this whole thing in motion, and you have to wonder what is her motivation for setting it in motion.
Can I just say, you know, as the grandfather of a granddaughter who was born through IVF to 2 gay sons, this story, which at first seems so yuck and off-putting, and what's money have to do with it, what's economic have to do with it, it should be what's love have to do with it, not money, right? But our granddaughter wouldn't exist but for economics as well. The egg donor, you know, who was a young college student, a med student, and who could use whatever she got paid for a couple of weeks of hard work, and she's young, and she's, you know, she's healthy, and okay, so it's 2 tough weeks, but now she's got ka-ching, ka-ching in her bank account. That's money. That's also my granddaughter. And then the woman Bethany, who was a surrogate, who was amazing, and we love her, but also, and she did it also because she believed in helping a gay couple have a kid, et cetera, but also money. So I just want to say you know, I sympathize with Eli and Benjamin's yuck, and weirdly enough, for my family, this story has deep resonance.
Well,
economics and fertility, economics and children, economics in the children industry are one.
We celebrate that you have a granddaughter now.
Yes.
Ouch. Ouch.
Yes.
So we are very happy, and we are very
Yes.
happy for your son and for
Thank-
Davide. I think this story is a little different because I'm always puzzled when I read this. What about Abraham? Why was he so passive? Why
Right.
was he passive, or we don't know about it? But I mean, it's like if my wife will tell me something like that, I would say,
This is
Right.
one of
"Are you
the
tricking me? You want a divorce?" It's like,
this is one of the really interesting questions. We talk about all the trials that Abraham goes through, tests of his faith.
Right.
But this actually seems to be test number 1. Do you believe that God's promise that you're going to have children will come to fruition with your partner, right? It's impossible to imagine. It's impossible to believe. Obviously, the right thing to do is seek out a surrogate in their situation. Their imagination is not quite broad enough for the faith that he's later going to be tested for. And just doubling back for a minute,
Yeah.
I also want to say, like, how beautiful is the Torah that this complex, difficult story is one of the roots that yields the miracle of modern day surrogacy.
Yeah, amen to that. But it is complicated because economics and different socioeconomic class. I mean, who are the people who are surrogates in our society? The people who are surrogates in our society are the people who is prepared to carry somebody else's baby for 9 months. The people who need the money. They could also be beautiful. They could also be incredibly beautiful human beings, and they could also have a beautiful neshama. And they could, again, I mean, I have a picture of our surrogate on my desk. I have a picture of, and I have the picture of our surrogate on my phone, right? So I love our surrogate, and I just want to acknowledge that there is also an economic basis to this. Okay, keep going.
Before we
Yes.
go, I want to come back to Sarah because I think she gets kind of lost in this, and I think her coming to Avram, I see it now a little differently, also because of being in community with women dealing with infertility and this question of like, what are you okay with? Like, do you give up your dream of being pregnant and go with a surrogate? Do you give up your dream of going with a surrogate and go with adoption? What will satisfy your deepest yearning and also your ability to be seen in society, right? Her only way to be seen in society is to be a mother. And so I really see in this question, like when she comes to Avram, I think years ago, I just saw it as like, she's just like, okay, fine, just do this thing. I don't care. But now I see just the deep pain that she's coming to him and saying like, I don't want to be a failure. I don't want you to be a failure and not have kids. That our society is based on having children. Let's do this thing, and I think I'll be good with it. And she doesn't even recognize the kind of pain that she's taking on because she's just trying to function in the world.
Elisa, could you just give an interpretation of something, emotional interpretation of something I've never understood about it? It's the line, she says, consort with my maid. And then she says, perhaps I shall have a son through her. Ulai ibana mimena. My question is, in what way would Sarah feel emotionally that Hagar's son is her son?
So, and understanding it through a modern lens, what I could say is that, she's thinking like, maybe I'll feel like enough of a mother if she has a child and I get to, and is part of my household. Maybe that will be enough for me.
I mean, legally, that child would be hers in that ancient context. So makes sense. What's so interesting to me is, unlike modern day surrogacy or adoption, where really the parents are able to make that leap to say, this really is my child. What's so fascinating about this story is how alienated Sarai becomes from the idea of this child being hers.
Yes. Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Which I feel like if I'm reading like a modern read on that, I think like the child comes and it's just like that child represents all of her failures and she can't get over that. If she sees in that child that she could not do it.
Well, and would be so interesting, like if Hagar had not kind of said, oh, look, now I have more status, might Sarah have been able to get there? I don't know.
So let's pick up with the rest of verse 4, because I'm so curious about your read on this. He cohabited with Hagar.
He cohabited with Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was lowered in her esteem.
Could you talk about that? What just happened, and why did that just happen?
So I know we're reading just for pshat, but I love the midrash here, which is that she's like, oh, looky here, you think you're such a righteous woman, and like, look, one go and I'm pregnant, and this, how many years have you been struggling with infertility? I mean, I'm not going to say anything, but I mean, I don't have to say anything, let's be clear. And that just feels like, if you read the biblical lens, which is that fertility is associated with divine love and approval, that's a rough go.
So how else? So are you critical of Hagar for that attitude, or not critical of her for that attitude?
I'm not. I mean, I don't see. I see everybody just struggling with their lot, and I can't even imagine what it's like for her. She doesn't get to pick her life partner. She doesn't get to pick her life decision. She doesn't get to decide if she wants to be a mother at this point. She's not really a mother anyway. Like the society would not allow her to have that child. So it's a complicated reality, and I don't know what, often when we're in most pain, we lash out at people. I don't know what her life. We only hear her words.
Right.
We don't hear Sarai's words.
We don't
to
know
her.
how Sarai treated her before she got pregnant.
Right.
Right. We know how Sarai treats her after, and we also know that this is a complicated
It was
relationship.
kind of like in your face.
What did Hagar do that manifested that she thought Sarai was lowered in her esteem? Because if you look at the text, Vatekal Gavirta Be'eneha, her mistress was lowered in her eyes. What did she do to manifest that?
I mean, that's a missing piece of the text.
Yes.
One would assume that even if her affect changed, even if she sat in a different chair or, said, oh, no, thank you, I'm not going to go pick up the wash today, I'm pregnant, right? All of that would be very perceivable to Sarai.
But there's even, I could imagine a scenario where they're friends, right? Let's imagine the scenario where she's actually part of Sarai's dowry, and the two of them sort of are young women together, and they have this camaraderie. And this whole time that Sarai's been married to Abram, she's been saying oh, it's so hard. We try, and we don't get pregnant. I don't want you to get your hopes up. It's so difficult. It's so hard. And just be prepared that this could take a very long time. And then she has sex once, and she gets pregnant instantly. And she's like, what's wrong with you? And it's not anything cruel. It's not anything mean. She's just I don't know. It's not hard. What are you talking about?
How else might Hagar have behaved to have not had this verse written about her? Was it avoidable? Was there anything that Hagar could have done in this situation to somehow be super sensitive to Sarah, or is it just inevitable that you're going to have pain, collision, friction?
I mean, from a modern eye, I would say it's inevitable. From an ancient eye, one could imagine a world where Hagar's first response is, Sarai, Sarai, your child is about to be born, right? Oh, aren't we so lucky? I am a vessel. This is about your merit, right? You could imagine a world in which Hagar tried to build Sarah up in this way. But look, I think, midrashically, when you think about Hagar herself and her place in this whole story, there is a piece of that faith that is being struggled with on all sides.
Yeah, and Wes, this is a question for you. It could have been, just hypothetically, that the surrogate mother for your grandchild, after she was giving birth, she would say, I want to keep this child for me.
No, that's why you have lawyers. Because the whole idea.
I know, but the desire could have been in her.
Yeah, but that's why you have lawyers. That's why
there's also a very interesting piece that I think we haven't unpacked, which is love. I mean, that is why sometimes people do keep children that are not theirs, because they fall in love. They have a sense, this is my destiny, that I have a role in this story also. And it's interesting because later God is going to come and say, oh, don't worry, you actually will have a role. You have a story. And we start to hear what Hagar's story will be as a main character.
Yeah.
Can we, before we move on,
yes.
we haven't talked about Abram at all, and it feels like he's mostly silent. All that we get here is that he heeds her request, but I'm really curious to hear your perspective on how are you feeling if you're Abram in this moment? How are you feeling sort of watching all of this transpire?
Yeah, not an ideal description of Abraham here. I would say. And we don't know what he was thinking. Maybe he thought, wow, yes, this is painful for my wife, but this could be a great opportunity for me to have a son. Or saying, yes, honey, I'll do whatever you want. It's like, or saying, ooh, I have more women now. So, it's like there are so many different perspectives on this.
If you posit a loving husband, if you posit a husband who loves his wife more than anything in the world, if you posit a husband who loves his wife more than he loves his own self, okay? If you posit a husband who says, honey, I love you forever, and says that every day and means it, okay? I think Abraham here is in an impossible situation, and he can't win. He's literally in no-win land. Because if he says yes to her request, by definition, he's having sex with another woman. Granted, it's because Sarah asked him, and granted, it's to have a child, and granted, it's not an affair, and right? But still, he's being intimate with somebody else. And if he says, so that's damned if he does. And if he says, no, honey, I just cannot do this for you, well, her deepest desire is for a child, and she's asking. So I actually feel a tremendous amount of sympathy, empathy, sadness for Abraham, because there is no way he can win. There's no win in this for him.
And then there's the other possibility, which the Midrash really imagines when they associate Hagar with Keturah,
Right.
which is that actually Abraham and Sarah's relationship was not one like the one you described, and indeed it was filled with tension and more like a business model when they're out there making all the new converts for the Jewish religion. They're working hard together, but actually Hagar is the one that he hopes to go to, which then keys in that her maid is her mistress is lowered in her eyes.
Right.
Well, she now knows that she's the one who ultimately will wind up with Abraham.
Then this is such complexity. This is just so rich. What happens when, and you could pick either partner, a husband has two wives, like the first wife who dies and then the second wife, or a wife has two husbands, the first husband who dies and the second husband. And then I hear about this all the time, which is there's the husband I married, and there's the husband who's the love of my life. There's the wife that I married, I loved her, and then there's my second wife who is the love of my life. And then it gets really, really complex in the real world, because where am I going to be buried? Right? Like very often I have kids from the first wife, who's my wife and who I loved, but is not the love of my life. But I have kids and grandkids. And then I have the second wife, who is the love of my life, but I don't have kids with her. And so now I'm going to be stuck with all eternity with the wrong wife, but I'll be dead anyway. But And these are real complexities. And I think, to your read, I mean, the classic midrash is that Keturah is Hagar, as you point out, which means, right? And then if you read it, like Abraham's story from the first minute you meet him until now is he can't get pregnant, 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 can't get pregnant. A miracle happens, she gets pregnant. And then when he marries Keturah, boom, 6 kids in one verse. 6 kids, boom, in one verse. So you get the sense, when you look at Abraham's life story, that Sarah was his wife, wife, and the Keturah, Hagar, was the love of his life with the 6 kids. That's actually that's right, 6 kids, 1 verse, 5 chapters, all this complexity. Okay, keep going.
Which ties in so much more as he sends her away. Like, that's so much more of an akedah. Like, you get the sense he has a deep relationship with her. We don't know about his relationship with Isaac, but like that's the first real painful test.
Right. Okay, keep going.
Okay. Sarai said to Abram, "The wrong done me is your fault. I myself put my maid in your bosom. Now that she sees that she is pregnant, I am lowered in her esteem. The Lord decide between you and me." Abram said to Sarai, "Your maid is in your hands. Deal with her as you think right." Then Sarai treated her harshly, and she ran away from her.
Yeah, so, what does harsh look like? What happened here?
I don't know. I still don't like Abraham's behavior. You were trying to say before that he may be in an impossible situation. I don't see it. I don't see it. I mean, he goes, has sex, gets the other person pregnant, and says the wife, do whatever you want. Deal in the way you want. It's like, I'm washing my hands from the whole situation.
Right.
I have nothing to do with the whole thing.
Or it's possible that Sarah's clued in, that she sees, like, I see how you're looking at her. I see what happens when she walks by. You love her. Like,
Right.
it's your fault. It's because you loved her that you created this situation, because now she knows that you love her. And he's like, what do you want from me? Like, I did what you asked me to do. I don't want to ruin it's a good business relationship that we've got here. Like, I don't want to mess things up. Like, what can I say?
Right. What do you want
I
from
It
me?
looks
broke
like we
this.
watched too many soap operas.
No, but I also think it's also, you're also putting Abraham in an impossible situation, because by this point he's been married for a long time to the same woman, and you've got a lot of tread on that tire. And now, if he's also just a flesh and blood, if he's a regular dude, if he's a regular guy, in addition to this holy patriarch, and he has sex with a much younger woman, I have a good friend who says he would never have a drink with a woman in a bar who's not his wife, because he might enjoy it, right? And, it's a good idea to not have sex with a much younger woman who's not your wife, because you might enjoy it. And maybe he enjoyed it. And maybe he actually, you cannot control a fickle heart. And he's like, oh my God, geez, I haven't done that in 50 years. I've never done that. And so I think I think that he's human.
And there's this element of, like, when you're dealing with infertility, sex is not fun. Like, I could imagine that, like, there's so much frustration, there's so much anxiety, there's so much worry, there's so much pressure that isn't there, even if they're the same age, even if there's no different, even if she's less attractive, even if there's not chemistry, the fact that she's not obsessed with her lack of fertility means that they could have a very pleasant encounter, and he could be like, well, I didn't know this was possible.
Yeah. So I understand why Abraham throws up his hands, because, like, Lord, what do you want from me now? But could you talk about the verse, Vata'aneha Sarai? She treated her harshly, and she ran away from her. What did Sarai do to her?
So I think I love that we don't actually know, because it could be that she said horrible things. It could also just be that she's just gets her the cold shoulder, that she just makes her life miserable by being obviously angry and upset around her.
Can I just give a little love to our commentary here, which I find so it's so interesting that they're bringing the code of Hammurabi.
Right.
That's what we've got. It's the best we've got.
Yeah. I always, whenever I see Hammurabi, I just glaze over. Like, Hammurabi means next verse, next story. Like, that's not preachable. Hammurabi.
Michelle,
Hammurabi.
you brought it up, and it says in the side note that physical and psychological abuse.
So,
No, I mean, what's so interesting is, like, we're so in the dark on this verse that we're trying to kind of look towards other civilizations, other clues. Like, here's what would have been legally
Sarai
defined by
Hagar
that term.
to physical and psychological abuse.
Yeah, they're trying to construct and put together a puzzle of what
so
that
she runs
could
away.
have meant.
Okay, so I just want to say now, by the way, okay, so remember, my frame of reference for this whole thing is, what does our pain do to us? And we all live in a world of just a lot of pain. What do we do with our pain so that it doesn't do to us what we don't want it to do to us? Yeah. And it feels like one of the things that we do, and you used this phrase earlier, Elisa, which is lash out. And it feels like in some way, so Hagar and Sarai both know that they're both in pain for different reasons. Hagar gets pregnant, she kind of lashes out at Sarah. You didn't get pregnant. Hagar gets pregnant, now Sarah lashes out at Hagar. Whatever Vata'aneha means, it's a lash out, and lash out is not a good move. Okay, keep going.
An angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the road to Shur, and said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, "Where have you come from, and where are you going?" And she said, "I am running away from my mistress Sarai." And the angel of the Lord said to her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her harsh treatment." And the angel of the Lord said to her, "I will greatly increase your offspring, and they shall be too many to count." The angel of the Lord said to her further, "Behold, you are with child and shall bear a son. You shall call him Ishmael, for the Lord has paid heed to your suffering. He shall be a wild ass of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. He shall dwell alongside all of his kinsmen." And she called the Lord who spoke to her, "You are El Roi," by which she meant, "Have I not gone on seeing after he saw me?" Therefore the well was called Ber Lahai Roi. It is between Kadesh and Bered. Hagar bore a son to Abram, and Abram gave the son that Hagar bore him the name Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram.
Wow, now this is just so interesting and so rich. What do you think of the angel? Because let me just tee this up. The angel asks Hagar, what's going on? Where are you coming from? Where are you going? And she says, "I'm running away from my mistress." And the angel says, "Go back and submit to her harsh treatment. Shuvi el gevertech v'hit ani tachat yadeha." Submit to her harsh treatment. So I'm not liking that angel. Not liking that angel. And then the angel says, "By the way, you're pregnant. By the way, you're going to have a child. By the way, you're going to be okay as well. The Lord is going to see you and protect you. I will increase your offspring, and they shall be too numerous to count." And then she says, "You see me." I mean, that's Harold Kushner's interpretation of El Roi, the God who sees me. God is the God who notices the oppressed, the needy, the marginalized, those of whom human society takes no notice. So here's my question, dear colleagues. How could it be that the angel who says, "Go back and submit to that harsh treatment," is the same angel that she sees, Hagar sees, as the angel who sees me?
I like the angel.
Tell us more.
I like the angel because the angel is protecting Hagar. The angel is saying, "I know your reality is bad, but it's going to be much worse here in the wilderness. You won't survive, your child won't survive. At least you have a house and you have food over there. And trust me, the future will be much better, and you will be the father of the nations."
I'm still stuck on our translation from before that we changed her from maid to slave in English, but actually the Hebrew didn't change. It's still shifcha, whereas later, when in our next chapter, which I don't know if we'll get to or not, she does change to ama. So there is another word, but actually that's not what's used. Her status actually hasn't officially or externally changed in any way, and I think the angel is acknowledging that there is a reality that she's living with. But interestingly, Abraham is the one who, or Abram at this time, is the one who names the child. And, we have so many moments in the Torah where the mother is so connected with the children and their names. And in this case, the angel tells Hagar, sorry, I promise I'm getting there. The angel tells Hagar that your child is going to be Ishmael.
Yeah,
and
you shall call him Ishmael.
Right, and then Abraham is the one who names it, and Sarah's not associated with that. So it's clear that somewhere in between, Hagar has returned home and said to Abraham, "Hey, guess
Ishmael.
what? We're going to call our son
Ishmael,
and I got this from an angel." And so, in fact, although her external status hasn't changed, in a sense, by going back, the angel understands that there's something very real about her status with regard to Abraham that is changing and that
And
will continue.
by the way, by telling Abraham that our son is going to be Ishmael, she kind of asking protection from him as well.
and
So we like the angel.
So I think there's a
Wes.
lot in the angel there.
Sorry, we
Yeah.
like the angel.
well,
So not sorry, but I also think that there's I really appreciated your lawyer comment from earlier, because I really see this angel as lawyer, being like, here's the contract, here are the terms, it'll be better for you in this way, and I can negotiate a little bit for you on the name so that you can get at least yourself seen.
what I really appreciate about your read, Michelle, is that you tease out a real intimacy and deep connection between Hagar and Abraham that the text doesn't say explicitly, right? Because the angel tells Hagar, you shall call him Ishmael. And then the text says Abraham, Hagar bore a son to Abraham, and Abraham gave the son, Hagar bore him the name Ishmael, which only could have happened if there was a transmission from Hagar to Abram, which suggests that there was intimacy and caring, that it wasn't just a business arrangement, it was a human connection, which further reinforces maybe Sarah was the wife and maybe Hagar/Keturah was the love of his life. All of that is in there. So let me, as we wrap up this first story, Hagar is back. Hagar is back with Ishmael. Hagar is back with Sarai. Abraham is now back with his wife and his concubine, or his wife and the woman that he loves, or his wife and the woman who is the mother of his son, and there's Ishmael. As we wrap up Genesis 16 with this messy, complex set of issues, which, again, has such a resonance for today's world, what do you take away? What is the lesson? What does this teach us about the better ways and not better ways to deal with our pain?
I want to bring a little humor here, so because it's hard for me to understand from a bigger perspective. For example, let me do an analogy quickly. The Celtics won last year the season, all right? And often when a team wins, at the end of the season, you can go to the store or order online like a book or a magazine with all the best pictures of the winning and celebrating and everything. So you never buy one when the season was a failure, was horrible, right? So you compile the best moments and you buy that. Who put all these stories together in the Bible? They are all characters that are so flooded and so, they don't do well. So it doesn't make us look good. Look, these are our patriots. This is LeBron James. This is Michael Jordan. Was it the opposite, trying to tell us that they are human beings who have their own problems, so we can relate more with them? It's hard for me to get around that.
And amplify that question, because this is high holiday material, right? So we actually put the idea of this really broken triangle in front of us during our holiest season.
But I think you're actually, I love your sports analogy here, because to me that's core. What is it? How is it that they're winning the World Series, or whatever I share my lack of sports knowledge, but whatever the equivalent is for the Celtics, it's not the World Series.
Celtics is basketball.
Basketball. So what's the name of the thing? It's
wow.
I even know more than that.
Okay, but anyway, so it's not like they're winning. How are they winning? They're staying in a relationship. Like, they're all super messy. They're all super in pain. They're also super struggling. Everyone has it rough. No one is winning, and yet they're staying together, and they're holding together, and they're building a society that's messy and complex, but where everybody's dealing with their pain, and that's amazing.
So it turns out we'll have to come back to the second story next week, but it feels to me like the hero in the story of the four characters, right? You have Sarai, you have Hagar, you have Abraham, and you have the angel. The one who feels like it's the hero is the angel, because the angel gets the name, the one who sees me. And it feels to me like the challenge, the spiritual challenge of this story, and the challenge of what to do when we have pain, is we could lash out, which is what the characters do. That's not so helpful. We could engage in self-pity, like cry in the wilderness. That's understandable, but not productive. And that the challenge here is to be like this angel who somehow sees people in their pain and somehow makes them feel seen. And what's really hard to do, and isn't that the story of the Jewish world since October 7th? What's really hard to do is to see somebody else's pain when you are in your own pain, right? It's really hard to see somebody else's pain when you are in your own pain. And maybe one of the spiritual aspirations of this whole set of messy stories is, can we see somebody else's pain even when we are in our own. Shabbat Shalom. See you next week.